Now, as all eyes remain fixated on the leaderboard, we continue to dissect the preliminary results. To help us do this hour is political analyst Professor Susan Booysen and Dr. Dale Mckinley. Good afternoon to the both of you. Thank you for joining us on SABC.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Perhaps to start with you, Professor, the Northern Cape has completed at least the vote counting on their part. They've processed. And just looking at those numbers, the ANC is at 49%. Just your views on what we've seen there.
Yes, Northern Cape is a particularly fascinating case, and on the seat projections we see out of the 30 seats that the province has, ANC is probably looking at getting 15. That means one short of a majority. And it's fascinating because Northern Cape for several elections, for almost all of the elections since democracy started, has had an ANC majority, and it had been growing strongly at one point. It was not a province that the ANC expected to lose at this point in time. So, and that is a definite and interesting shift of power that we see there. In several other provinces, the ANC is either maintaining a narrow majority, like in Free State or in Mpumalanga, and others a more secure majority. But the balance of power along the provinces, and especially in Northern Cape then too, is not what it used to be.
Indeed, it's not. Doctor, your view on this, because they would now need some sort of a coalition partner to form government. There's the Good Party there, it got 0.47%, not enough. But then you've got the likes of PA with 8%. What do you make of just everything there in the Northern Cape?
Well, it's a microcosm of what's happening across the country in some ways. I mean, if you think about it nationally, the ANC is going to be faced with the same kind of question. Who do we ally with? Who do we coalition with? And in the Northern Cape, I mean, it seems to me as if a range of smaller parties could do that for them. But I think they're going to have to bite the bullet. My sense is that despite how ideologically or maybe strategically it might be difficult for the ANC to consider, they probably need to consider coalition talks with the DA possibly in that context. Because I think that would make a much more viable coalition government, even if it was, some people would have to swallow their pride.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that some might have to swallow their pride, because the Democratic Alliance is part of the coalition multi-party charter. Now, with that said, I listened to John Steenhuisen today, and he said at this point the priority remains post the consolidation of all the results. They need to meet as the multi-party charter, but he's ruling nothing out at this point, because another important factor is for them to stop what they call the doomsday coalition of the ANC, EFF and MK. So do you think that possibly a DA-ANC coalition is possible, as Dr. Dale says?
All the indications are, and also from conversations that I had on the floor here with various political parties, indications are that it is definitely a possibility. We know that the multi-party charter is having a meeting tomorrow, and then on Sunday apparently DA federal structures are meeting. The ANC top 7, NWC, NEC are meeting with the provinces to try to thrash out a central ANC position across the different formations of the ANC. And then I have heard that the ANC is considering issuing almost an open invitation. Not entirely open. I believe the Mckinley and the EFF will not be inclined to accept the invitation, but others will be more inclined, and the DA will probably be more inclined. They're taking the preparatory steps, but then the ANC gets a bit of safeguard for it to protect its own following, that it doesn't just align with the DA, but then give an invitation and see whether a party like the DA comes on board. I must emphasize, this is one of the voices a strong one that I heard in the ANC today. I cannot say that this is the formal position yet.
Okay. Dr. Dale, your take on just this, because here the Democratic Alliance has stated that they have a few non-negotiables, among them being the conversation around the NHI and the Bella Bill. I listened to John Steenhuisen in one particular program stating this. If we bring it to the economic hub, Gauteng, 35% is where the ANC currently is. The Democratic Alliance is currently standing at 27.81%. So it is a coalition that could work, they could form government. But here are these two non-negotiables, the NHI. And if we look at the NHI, the chair of the ANC in Gauteng is none other than Mr. Panyaza Lesufi, who told the electorate that they can go to any hospital of their liking beyond the elections due to the NHI.
Well, first of all, anything in politics, anything is negotiable. There is no non-negotiables in politics. So I think that's somewhat, it's understandable that Steenhuisen would say that now because he's speaking to his constituents and he wants to reassure them. If you remember, the ANC said there were a lot of things that were non-negotiable a while back. So I think we can put that one aside. The question is, and I want to take the quote by Nomvula Mokonyane yesterday when she was asked, she said the ANC will do what is in the country's interest, not in the... Now, if we take that, even at face value, then there is the possibility, as I say, of it makes sense. It would be a super majority, not only in Gauteng, but nationally. It would take away, basically the EFF and MK are progeny of the ANC. They are splits, like COPE was back in 2009. To pull them back into the fold at this stage, when there's still factional battles, would be pretty difficult, I think, for the ANC in terms of creating a stable government. On the other hand, they're going to have to compromise in order to get a stable government, and that would be possibly with the DA.
But these are fundamental differences because the NHI, particularly for the ANC, as a movement has been a rallying point, a lobbying point here where they've gone to the downtrodden and they've told them that you will have universal access to healthcare. So it's something that they feel very strongly about. But the Democratic Alliance also feels very strongly about it. They don't want to alienate the business community. You've got the likes of Discoveries, all these medical aids that are going to challenge this particular bill that has been
But
signed
there's room
into
for
law.
compromise. The NHI is far from being in form where it's going to be implemented. We're talking about several years here.
Yes.
So that's the art of politics. The art of politics is to compromise. If you had it your own way, the ANC is going to have to learn this lesson because it hasn't had to do this for the most part. That's what we've been talking about. This is the first time they've lost that majority. They're going to have to swallow it, their pride, and they're basically going to have to say, okay, we would like all of those points, but we're going to have to compromise on two. And the DA is not in a, it has basically maintained its support. It's not in a hugely massive, strong position to be calling shots. So the question is, are the political parties going to do what's in the nation's interest, or are they going to do what's in the party's interest? I think that's the question we must be asking them.
Then, Professor, I want to take you to KZN. It's all the rave right now. Everybody's talking about what we're seeing in KZN, particularly with MK. A number of pundits just before the elections had all stated that at the very least, the MK would be or reflect in the lead on the leaderboard, but it would at best just shave off a bit of the ANC's support base. But here they've gone on to become the leader of the pack.
Yes.
Did you expect this, and what is your take of what we're seeing now?
Now, we knew the balance of forces was changing in the province. We knew the MK was rising. We did not, and I did not expect the extent to which this has materialized in that province, extent to which this became a groundswell movement, and the MK party really literally mopped up not just dissent within the ANC into its own ranks, but also from a range of other parties, especially the EFF, which had been expected to grow in the province. None of that happened, and small parties, many of them feel very affected by the rise of the MK party in that province. So this is the extent of the rise is unexpected, and it is really an unprecedented rise for a political party, for a new opposition party. One can take that the way it has been positioned has been incredibly clever, and some of the MK followers on the floor here also link it to Jacob Zuma and his affinity for chess playing, and how the calculated moves have been happening, how they could almost disuse structures of the ANC to mobilize, how they could reach out and exactly use the weaknesses in relation to reaching out and looking after the needs of the people, those weaknesses.
Especially the traditional leaders. I mean, one could easily say it was a masterstroke because he was among the last to have his manifesto. And there he spoke about looking to perhaps curtail the power of the courts and take more power to traditional leaders. And then fast forward, we have a meeting with the king and traditional leaders in KwaZulu-Natal where he addresses this issue of curtailing, or an attempt by the African National Congress-led government to curtail the powers of traditional leaders. Was there some sort of a chess move here where maybe even those traditional leaders felt that this could be the party or the man that would see to our interests beyond the elections, Doctor?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not surprised. And there is historical precedent. I was just revisiting the 2009 election results. COPE, which broke from the ANC as a result of Thabo Mbeki's removal, got 1.3 million votes in the 2009 election, which is about what probably MK is going to get. And I would interpret this as it's almost a politics of grievance. Grievance both in terms of what happened to ex-President Zuma and what happened within the ANC, but also a grievance in the sense of KwaZulu-Natal. And it's a province that for the last 10 years has been rife with massive political violence and factionalism. And so I think it's ripe for the kind of politics that MK was playing, which was to play to traditional constituencies, play to a sense of grievance and victimology. And I would like to point this out as well, which is if we look at the board, I just calculated this, 92% of the MK's votes come from 3 provinces. KZN, Gauteng, and Mpumalanga, and from particular sections of that province. And so I think that there is a tendency right now amongst I've noticed, to sort of say this is a massive phenomenon that's there. They're going to get 12%. It's a bit of a surprise, but it's not unprecedented. My question is, how sustainable is the politics of grievance and the politics of that without any kind of program?
And that is the real question, because many have said we do tend to see new political parties getting those numbers, but to sustain beyond these elections becomes the real test, which is what we're seeing with the economic freedom fighters. But before this, Doctor, I want to talk about something that the MK has raised. They've taken exception to perhaps the characterization of what we're seeing in KZN, saying that the DA calling it some sort of an ethnic identity vote here, and the ANC saying it's perhaps tribalism. They've said it's undermining the agency of the Zulu people. Your take on just that, and some saying perhaps it's the politics of personality that we're seeing here.
Well, at least the personality was a big add to the mix. Tribalism, ethnicity definitely is part of the mix there. And also one can explain the high numbers of support in some of the provinces, some areas, those provinces where that type of identity, Zulu identity, is present, definitely. But the leadership issue comes into it, and the willingness to organize and to antagonize the ANC, to organize in the face of resistance from the ANC, and target President Cyril Ramaphosa as leader of the ANC. The MK party is making no excuses for the fact that they really want to bring Cyril Ramaphosa's career as president of the country to an end. They see this
but
as
the former president, Jacob Zuma himself, has said he feels targeted by the ANC. For the longest time, he said that he's even tried to go and raise funds outside of the country, and he's been stopped somehow. We don't know if there's evidence to that, but nevertheless, he has consistently stated that he is a victim, and he doesn't know why they keep targeting him. Just in closing, Doctor, I want to take it to Mpumalanga. Mpumalanga has been quite a surprise, because just building up to the elections, it seemed as though many analysts had said KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng is possibly gone. But where the ANC might look to regain, at least on the national picture, would be the likes of Mpumalanga, which has always been the stronghold of the ANC. But now it looks as though the absence of a Didi Mabuza, who was considered a serious mobilizer, a person who identified with strongman politics in the era of when we still had the Premier Leagues, that he was the only person that could probably consolidate in Mpumalanga, and now under the chairmanship of Ndlovu, they couldn't produce something above a 70%.
Well, listen, I think we've also got to look at the politics of patronage. Let's be clear that part of the reason why the electorate has responded in the way they have to the ANC is precisely because they feel let down in terms of service delivery and the basics of life. What is one of the explanations for that? And particularly in Mpumalanga, where there were many, but even before KZN, there were quite a lot of political assassinations and very violent kind of politics, was a serious politics of patronage. When that starts to unravel, people then begin to look for new homes. And once again, if you look at the districts, if you look at the breakdown of where Mpumalanga and where the support for MK came, it came in the southern part of Mpumalanga, which is quite a different history in terms of the movement as well. So I think, in my sense, is that the ANC's whether it's in Mpumalanga or whether it's Gauteng or whether it's in KZN, because of, I think, predominantly that's always been a province that MK and Zuma has been popular in, is that they are paying for the sins of incumbency and the weaknesses of those sins of incumbency, and MK is taking advantage of it. EFF took advantage of it in the last elections, and so you see, and this is how the electoral cycle goes. And so I don't think we must read into this some kind of permanent massive shift in South African politics outside of that the ANC itself is breaking up, because I would say that when we get 5 years from now and MK is contesting, then let's see where things are at that point in time as well.